What is up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, brought to you by Sticks.com. I'm Emma Lingen. I'm joined tonight by Michael Lagello, and we are coming at you live to talk about round one, game 5 between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators. And what a game it was. The Senators take this one 4-0, forcing a game 6. Toronto could not close it out. Michael, I'm sure that lots of people have lots of feelings about this, and we can't wait to hear them. Wherever you are watching us from tonight, whether it's YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the hockey news platforms that we are live on right now, do want to thank you for tuning in and encourage you to send us all of your questions, comments, rants, thoughts, complaints, grievances about the Maple Leafs and the Senators tonight. We would love to hear your comments, and we'd love to feature some of them here on the show. So definitely send us what you're thinking about this game. Of course, we've also got game 5 between the New Jersey Devils and the Carolina Hurricanes going on right now. That game, what a game it has been. New Jersey took an early 3-0 lead, and that game is now tied 4-4 with 7 minutes left in regulation. So we'll be sure to keep you updated on that one. Puck also just dropped between the Minnesota Wild and the Vegas Golden Knights, so we'll keep an eye on that. And then we've got Edmonton and LA starting later on this evening, so we're going to touch on that as well. But before we get into all of that, do want to remind you all that Playoff Frenzy Live is brought to you by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks when you can get pro-level composite sticks without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That's Stix.com. Head there now and gear up. Okay, Michael, we got to talk about it. We got to start here. The Leafs are 1-12 entering tonight. The Leafs were 1-12 in their last 13 series clinching games. They are now 1-13 in their last 14 series clinching games. Are these the playoff demons coming back to haunt them? How much of an overreaction do you think it is to say that the Leafs are in trouble right now?
They're definitely in trouble. And yes, the demons are out. They need an exorcist. And I don't know if there's anyone in the GTA right now who doesn't think they're going to blow this series. Now, I think the thing that was the most disturbing from the point of view of the Maple Leaf fan base was the fact that really their team didn't show up. Their team really underperformed. Now they got lots of shots on goal, but I believe in all 5 games of this series, the team that has had the more shots on goal has lost every game. So shots on goal really don't mean anything. It's winning the puck battles. It's getting performance on special teams, and the special teams battle is the thing that's the most stark, because I think it was 5 for 9. The Leafs were on the power play in the first 3 games, which they won all 3 of them. And then they went 0 for 4, including the double minor in overtime in game 4 when Tavares was not available. And they didn't score a power play goal tonight. So as goes the power play, goes the fortunes of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And if the pressure was not focused on them coming into game 5, it sure as hell is going to be on them in game 6 and maybe game 7 if we go that far.
Well, we had Eli in the comments there saying Sens in 7. I think a lot of people are starting to feel that way about this series, given the Leafs' playoff history. You did mention, Michael, the power play for the Leafs. Want to talk about that too in a little bit. But first, talking about the shots on goal, shots in the first period alone, Toronto led in shots 12-4. Allmark was dialed in for the Senators. This was by far his best game of the season, or of the series rather, and it was understandably the Senators' best game of the series. It seems like, we talked about this early on in the series. The Senators need a goaltender who could steal them some games. And Allmark wasn't playing like that until tonight. We saw him playing like a goaltender who could steal them a few playoff games. He's gotten better in each game. Of course, really rough go of it in game one. He allowed 6 goals, and then he allowed 3 goals in each of the next 3 games in the series. And then, of course, got the shutout tonight. So, how important is it for the Senators that Linus Ullmark is finally starting to play like the Linus Ullmark they need him to be?
I mean, it's extremely important, but on top of that, getting some offense is also a contributing factor. But the game plan from Travis Green tonight clearly was, let's protect the house. Let's hope we can get the lead. And then let's watch the Toronto Maple Leafs implode, because once they're behind and once the game gets deeper and deeper into the second and third period, that, everybody is clutching their pearls at the Scotiabank Arena, because they're like, okay, you can't blow a 3-0 lead to the Ottawa Senators. Well, yes, you can. And, they have somebody on their team in Claude Giroux who was down 3-0 to the Boston Bruins in 2010 and came back from 3-0 to win in 7 games. And all this team has done, the Toronto Maple Leafs, with this current construction, not the 23-man roster, but the core group, all they have done, except for one series in 2023 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, is choke. And I don't, go out of my way to use that phrase. That's what they've done. They did it against Montreal in 2021. They've done it to Columbus and Boston, and you name a team, and that's what they've done. If they do it again, I think there's little doubt that this team is going to be dismantled. Not, every piece, but you can say goodbye to Mitch Marner, and I've said that on the wraparound a bunch of times. If they lose in the first round, Mitch Marner will not be back. John Tavares, I don't know if you can hold him responsible because he's played well in this series, but this is the thought process that's going through the Toronto Maple Leafs collectively right now. Is not, well, we got to go to Ottawa and win Game 6. No, they're thinking we've got to go to Ottawa and not choke away Game 6.
And if you are just joining us now, this is the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, brought to you by Sticks.com. I'm Emma Lingen, talking here with Michael Agello. We are going to be joined in just a few here by Michael Trakos, who is coming to us live from Scotiabank Arena to tell us about what I'm sure was a very fun post-game media availability for the Maple Leafs. So stay tuned for that. You're talking about Marner, Matthews, that core group. Like you said, Tavares he's been productive in this series, but Marner and Matthews, 1 goal each. Matthews in particular looks like he cannot buy a goal. He looked like that in this series, or this game rather. I mean, Ottawa just looked, like you said, they were stifling Toronto's offense. And I mean, no disrespect to the Ottawa Senators defense, who played tremendously tonight, but it really is unacceptable to see when, to me, watching this game, the Leafs' best line, their best forward line, it looked like the Steven Lawrence, Scott Laughton, Calle Yarncroke line, which that's a problem. If no disrespect to those guys, but if you have Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and William Nylander and John Tavares on your team, that line should not be your best line. So what do you think, how much of this, you talked about the mentality now going into Game 6, how it's not just, oh, we have to win. Now it's, oh, we can't choke this away. How much of a detriment do you think that that's going to be for the Maple Leafs and, kind of how they view this series?
Oh, it's tons of weight on their shoulders. I mean, Ottawa coming into this series were, let's play fast and loose because nobody thinks we're going to win. And then they're down 3-0 in the series, and they lose 2 games in overtime, but they're down 3-0, and they probably say to themselves, well, we must adapt and adopt that philosophy. Nobody thinks we're going to come back from 3-0. Nobody thinks we're going to win. So let's just play, with no consequence. Whereas Toronto, I think, they were confident up 3-0, but they really didn't play confidently even in game 4. And tonight, they were really gripping the sticks pretty tightly. And, Matthews had one opportunity where he shot the puck about 3 feet above the crossbar. They had some breakaway chances early in the first period, or opportunities. And it seemed that the Leafs tactic was to do many stretch passes. And I mean, they were getting breakaway opportunities, but they weren't clean-cut breakaways like Marner had in game 1. And because on a couple of them, Nick Jensen sort of cut off the lead forward from being able to get to their forehand, they didn't end up doing anything of major consequence. And then once Ottawa got the lead, then Toronto, I think, started to get even more tight. And their man advantage opportunities later in the game were completely ineffective. So this is an experienced team, but in a sense, their experience is undermanning or undercutting them, because their only experience has been losing in these series.
Tale as old as time, unfortunately. Again, got a good question here from our friends at Sticks.com. Want to get to that in a second, but first, just an update for everyone. Minnesota and Vegas already tied 1-1. About halfway through the first period, William Karlsson scored shorthanded for Vegas, and then I'm just going to give you one guess, Michael, of who you think scored for Minnesota to tie the game.
Let's see. Jacob Middleton. Oh, no. Kirill Kaprizov. Let me guess.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it was Kirill Kaprizov. And then, of course, New Jersey and Carolina still tied with about a minute to go in regulation. So we'll keep a close eye on that one as well. Now, back to the Sens and the Leafs. We got a good question here from our friends at Sticks.com. Are the Senators truly outplaying the Leafs, or are the Leafs beating themselves? Or I will add a third sort of all the above option in there, because I don't want to fully discount, what the Senators have done in this series. But again, how much of this do you think is the Senators? How much of it do you think is the Leafs beating themselves?
Game 4, I think the Senators outplayed the Leafs because there was a level of desperation of just surviving. Tonight, the Leafs beat themselves. Tonight, the Leafs got behind. They had many opportunities to take the lead, couldn't do so. Ottawa scores the opening goal on that long shot that Anthony Stolarz was screened on. And then throughout the rest of the second period, until maybe the last 2 minutes, Toronto was on their heels and Ottawa was playing with confidence. And then once Dylan Cousins got the shorthanded goal, and again, the power play was ineffective, and they had opportunities and, couldn't get the puck on the net, or, I mean, it was just, the Leafs were doing things in this game that they did not do in games 1 or 2, or even game 3, where I think that they were outplayed. But they won those games, so everybody looks past that. And, right now, you go back to Ottawa and in game 6 on Thursday, and like I said, I don't know anybody who doesn't think this is coming back to game 7 and Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada.
Yeah, I think that, now we're seeing you mentioned the power play for Toronto as one of the several things that's gone wrong, and we're going to get to that in a second. But I think looking at this series and just looking at the way that everything has gone, the trajectory for both of these teams, Ottawa has gotten better in each game because I think in large part Lena Allmark has looked better in each game. Toronto has been going the opposite way. They dominated game 1 and they did get confident going up 3-0. And now, it's starting to a lot of Leafs fans are starting to sweat because it is seeming like the same old story right now. But about the Leafs power play, Michael, there was in the third period, Ridley Gregg had what should have been a very costly penalty, put Toronto on the power play, and everyone's starting to really sweat this one and think, "Oh, the Leafs are going to tie it up. They're going to, they're actually going to make a comeback here." But no, not only do they not score on the power play, but Dylan Cousins scores shorthanded for Ottawa. So there was still, I think, a little over 10 minutes left in regulation at that point. So there was still a lot of time left, but I don't know about you. Did it feel to you like that goal that put the Leaf or the Sens up 2-0 was kind of the nail in the coffin for Toronto just for that game?
The air was sucked out of the building at that very moment. And I know that the Sportsnet broadcast showed fans at 2-0. I think it was still 2-0, but there was like maybe 3 minutes left. Fans walking out of the building because this fan base has so much scar tissue that I don't think that they thought that there was any chance that this team would climb back into this game after really just not showing up. I mean, the effort was disjointed, was pretty pathetic. And sometimes stats don't really speak to how one-sided things are, but Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk both had a goal and 2 assists and were both +3 in the game. Mitch Marner, Matthew Knies, Austin Matthews, John Tavares, and William Nylander. No points and a collective -18 from 5 forwards. You can't put lipstick on a pig. That's an oinker, folks. That's a pathetic performance from your key players. And yes, you can win games on goals by Simone Benoit or Max Domi, but in the end, you need your goaltender to make saves, you need your defense to play well, and you need your big scorers to score. And they didn't in this game.
They sure didn't at 5-on-5 or on the power play. Once again, if you are just joining us, this is the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. Emma Lingen, Michael Agello here, talking about Game 5 between the Leafs and the Senators. Of course, the Leafs were shut out 4-0 by Ottawa. We're hoping to have Michael Tracos join us here shortly from Scotiabank Arena to tell us what the vibe was like in the building, which I personally cannot wait to hear about. Also, just checking in around the league. Minnesota, Vegas still tied 1-1. New Jersey and Carolina are headed to overtime. Carolina could clinch the series with this one, but they are tied at 4-4 heading into overtime at Game 5 in Raleigh. So we'll definitely keep an eye, keep you all updated on that one. Michael, back to Toronto and Ottawa. We've just spent the last 20 minutes talking about all of the things that have gone wrong for the Maple Leafs. What we haven't talked about is the goaltending. Now, one of the storylines, I think, earlier in the series, one of the biggest storylines was, wow, look at Anthony Stolarz. The Leafs finally have a really solid number one goalie that they can actually put in and ride on a playoff series.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, I don't know. He wasn't the problem in this game, I don't think, but I'm curious if we think there's going to be maybe a goalie change in game 6, and perfect timing because Michael Trakos is here to join us, and I'm sure that he has some thoughts about that. So I do kind of wonder if we're going to see Joseph Wall in game 6. Let's see what other Michael thinks about that. There he is. Hello, Michael. What is
Hey, how you doing, Emma? How you doing, Michael?
good? We were just talking about the goaltending situation in Toronto. Do you think we see a goalie change in game 6?
I think you have to ask that question. And, it's not like you're going from a proven number one goalie who's been playing 60 to 70 games this year and going to a guy who hasn't played a lot. And Joseph Wall actually played more regular season games than Anthony Stolarz this year. And if not for a hot string at the end of the season, you might have seen Joseph Wall for game 1. So I don't think it'd be a panic move in the same way, but it's not like I blame this one totally on Stolarz. Like, Toronto couldn't score. Linus Ullmark was the story, and the other story was that the Ottawa Senators, I think, smell blood. And I was in the Ottawa Senators dressing room after the game, and the prevailing theme was the pressure's not on us anymore; it's on the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't know how you feel about that, Emma and Michael, but I kind of agree.
Yeah, I go ahead, Emma.
We were just talking about that. How much of this was the Senators outplaying the Leafs, and how much of this was the Leafs beating themselves?
Ridley Gregg gets a penalty at the end there, Emma, and you think this is the biggest boneheaded penalty that a guy like Ridley Gregg could take, and this is going to cost the Ottawa Senators not only the game but their playoffs. Instead, Toronto can't capitalize. The power play, which was just firing on all cylinders in the first 3 games, is tossing up goose eggs now. And to make matters worse, Ottawa scores another shorthanded goal. So I don't know what to say. It's like the hockey gods weren't on the Ottawa Senators side at the beginning of the series, and Toronto was getting every balance imaginable, and now it's working the other way. And I think that when you're the Toronto Maple Leafs and nothing is in a vacuum, like we can go back to 1967, the last year that the Leafs won a cup, or we can just go back, to the Matthews era, where since he's been on the team, this team struggles in elimination games. Like, what are they, 1-14 now, I believe the stat is? That is just brutal. And I think, the Leafs know it and their competition knows it. And like I said, there doesn't seem to be, like, when the Leafs were down or up 3-0 in this series, the comments coming from Ottawa was, yeah, well, the Red Sox came back and, they didn't say it, but the feeling was, well, this is Toronto. And until they win that 4th game, we don't believe that we're out of this. And, good on Ottawa. They forced a game 6. And I think that all the pressure in the world, like you mentioned, is on the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, I tweeted out when Gregg took that penalty. I said, "Breaking news: Ridley Gregg is an idiot," because that was a selfish, stupid penalty. There was no excuse for it, but he was let off the hook because the Leafs could not capitalize on that power play. They had a brief opportunity, and then they go the other way, and Dylan Cousins scores the shorthanded goal. Now the goaltending debate. Stolarz didn't see the first goal. It was, he was screened. I don't think he had a chance on it, and he had no chance. It was a 2-on-1 break, and Cousins, Stolarz went post to post and couldn't make the stop. So I don't think there's an excuse there for short of injury that would bring Craig Berube to make the decision to switch from Stolarz to Wall, other than he is a goaltender who has never played more than 28 games going into this season. He's played 33 this year. He did have that break for about 6 or 7 weeks with the recovering from the knee injury. But going into this series, he had never started a playoff game. And Joseph Wall has played well in the playoffs in relief. So it is an option. Do I think they're going to do it, Mike? I don't think they're going to do it.
No, the bigger concern for me, Michael, is that, number 34 on the Toronto Maple Leafs has not looked like a superstar. And, say what you want about, this is a team effort and, you win or lose as a team. you're paying Austin Matthews, top 3 salary in the league. This guy scored 69 goals last year. He is their captain now. I watch Edmonton. Every shift I notice Connor McDavid when he's on the ice. I don't notice Austin Matthews in the same way. Mm-hmm. And this was a perfect game for him to step up and put his stamp on the series. He hasn't had an Austin Matthews moment since he's been in a Leaf jersey. Like really, you could point to the first ever game that he played where he scores 4 goals against the Senators as his moment. But, we're still waiting for that playoff moment. Like Doug Gilmour had a playoff moment where he did the wraparound. Matt Sundin had multiple playoff moments. Where's Austin Matthews' playoff moment? And I'm sorry to point the finger at one guy, but when it's a guy who's making this much money, is now your captain, is arguably one of the top 5 players in the league, if not a top 3 player in the league, you need more from him than just, what does he have, 1 goal in this series?
Yeah. And Emma, the issue here, and we talked about this on the wraparound a bunch of times. Austin Matthews, he scored just over 30 goals this year. That's not an Austin Matthews year. Clearly, he is playing with some sort of injury. Now,
yeah,
we know that. That's not an excuse because players play in the playoffs injured, and you expect a guy who is making that kind of money to perform. He was clearly frustrated at the end of this game, so much so that I think he's going to sticks.com to look for some new sticks because he snapped the twig on the top of the boards. So the frustration is clearly there, but the question is, can they channel that frustration into actual performance? And not just him, but number 16, who's looking for the big payday this summer. He's been absent without leave the last few games.
Yeah, you definitely, it sounds simple, but you need your top guys to be your top guys, especially in the playoffs. We haven't been seeing that, with the exception of, like we said earlier in the show, John Tavares has shown up for this team in this series. We haven't seen it from the other guys. Thank you again, Michael. Want to let you go. Other Michael Tracos. There are too many Michaels. Do want to let you go, but really appreciate you joining us from Scotiabank Arena, talking about Game 5 and looking forward to Game 6.
Awesome. Have a great night, you too.
Thank you. All right, Michael A. Original Michael. We're gonna do a quick check-in over in Vegas. We've got the Wild and the Golden Knights. Vegas has gone up now 2-1. Mark Stone with the slap shot on or at even strength to go up 2-1 over the Minnesota Wild in that game. And then New Jersey, Carolina getting ready to start overtime here in just a few minutes. Again, if you are just joining us now, this is the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, brought to you by Sticks.com. Thank you to everyone who's been chiming in. Love seeing all of these comments. We had a feeling, we talked about this before we went live, Michael. We said, I feel like the comment section is going to be pretty hot for this one. People are going to have lots of feelings about the Leafs and the Sens. So love seeing all the comments. Keep them coming. And, we love answering questions as well. So if you have any, throw those in the chat as well. Looking at, we just kind of spent the last few minutes talking about this, Michael. We talked about it with Michael Tracos as well. We typically kind of look back at a game and say, okay, looking at the losing team, who's one guy who needs to step up? Who's someone who needs to have a bounce back? Now, we have talked about Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews ad nauseum here, and I think that those go without saying, as those guys need to show up for the Leafs in Game 6. But is there anyone else maybe that we haven't talked about that you think really could be kind of an X factor? Again, not that they should necessarily have to be, because you want Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner to be your X factor, but is there anyone else, as you look at this Leafs team, who you think could stand to have a bounce back game in Game 6?
Well, it may be unfair to him because he's been a playoff performer in the past. But first, you cannot depend on Matthews in his current state. Like I said, we believe he's had an injury that's affected his performance all year. And Mitch Marner, since I think 2018. He's been almost a no-show, except for one series against Tampa Bay. He's been a no-show in the playoffs for the last 6 or 7 years. William Nylander is not affected with that particular affliction. He has been a playoff performer. He did score in Game 4. He did assist on Oliver Ekman-Larsson's game-tying goal in the third period. If they're going to win in Ottawa in Game 6 on Thursday, they're going to need Nylander probably to take the team on his shoulders and either score on the power play or score 5-on-5. I mean, the way this series is going right now, it's probably going to be a 1-goal game. I mean, this game was a blowout in the end because of the empty net goals, but probably Ottawa's going to stick with playing it close to the vest and try to, again, get underneath the skin of the Leafs. And I think the Leafs will need goals from a guy like Nylander to have a chance to win.
Well, do want to wrap up our conversation here, Michael, because we do have overtime about to start between the Devils and the Hurricanes. Want to make sure we get to see that. Of course, Vegas still up 2-1 over Minnesota. And puck has dropped between Edmonton and LA. Still no score there. So lots going on. But before we do wrap up our conversation tonight, Michael, just taking a look around the rest of the playoffs, of course, we had the Battle of Florida last night. Was a very feisty one, very spicy game. Of course, Florida takes that one 4-2. They lead their series 3-1. We did get the news today that Aaron Ekblad has been suspended for 2 games. That was a hot topic of conversation. I was here with Andrew McInnes last night. We were talking about the hit that got him suspended. Of course, Brandon Hagel now will not be playing for Tampa Bay in the next game as a result of that hit. Michael, it wasn't even called a penalty in the game, and now he's been suspended. Ekblad has been suspended 2 games. What are your thoughts on the punishment? Do you think that it fits the crime, or how would you have handled this situation?
The bizarre thing is that Nico Mikkola gets a 5 at the beginning of the third period and gets fined $5,000. And as you just mentioned, Ekblad doesn't get penalized at all, and he gets 2 games. The Panthers won 2 games without Ekblad in the lineup. They can win 1 more game to finish off the series without him in the lineup in either Game 5 or Game 6. Not to say that his absence won't affect them, but I think that they could potentially finish off the series without him. The NHL, their consistency or lack thereof regarding some of the calls, as we talked about on the wraparound, the fact that Hagel gets suspended for a game on Barkov, but then Tkachuk gets a 5-minute major for the hit on Gensel, and then Tom Wilson, probably the most egregious one of them all, doesn't even get penalized, and Washington goes down and scores the momentum-changing goal against the Canadiens. There is no consistency. There were a few calls in the Ottawa-Toronto series that have been questionable. I guess we just have to come to grips with the fact that the officiating is always going to be inconsistent. I do think Tampa has an outside chance of climbing back into this series, but then Ekblad would be back for Game 7. Personally, I would like to see that series go 7 because it's that sort of mean big boy hockey that I enjoy. But I get the feeling that Florida is going to finish this one out.
All right. Well, we will just have to find out what happens there. Once again, this has been the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, brought to you by Sticks.com. If you are a Leafs fan who just watched that game between Toronto and Ottawa and you had an Austin Matthews moment and had to break a stick, then head over to Sticks.com and get yourself a new one. Once again, I am Emma Lingen. He is Michael Agello. We are here every single night during the playoffs, breaking down the big game of the night, all the big plays, all the action. You can find us live right here every single night. So thank you to everyone who has tuned in and joined us. We will be right back here tomorrow night, and we will see you then.